Hello, and welcome to Temple of the False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Bruce. I'm
Andy. Bruce. I'm Bruce. Yes. There we go. Loving that. This is
as I was going through that, I was like, yeah, it's been like a couple of weeks since we recorded. I got this. This is going so well.
Bam.
Wow. Welcome to episode 93.
92 times you've been Andy.
What can I say?
Maybe even more than that, actually.
Yeah.
You've probably been Andy for more than just 93 times.
I've been Andy for 30 years.
Man.
So, because it's the third episode of the season, it means we've got a deck tale. It's exciting. It's going to be real weird in 5 weeks when we do a deck tale on my deck and I don't have one anymore because I've taken apart all my decks because Dan told me to.
Well, okay. Now Dan's going to give you a new deck, right?
Yeah. You know, excellent. My buddy.
Sure.
Never met the man in my life.
Come on, you're in the same state.
I'm in the same, county.
Well, just start showing up at the same game store. Start playing some decks. I don't know what that one is. So I don't know either.
Before we get into weird stalkery territory, we briefly discussed this deck a couple weeks back when talking about Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, and that's all. That's when we talked about it, and
Well, let me jump right in then.
Please do.
For those of you wondering, the deck
sitting on the edges of your seats.
We are talking about my deck, one of my decks. It's my Boros deck, Tajic Magic.
Tajic Magic.
Yeah, that's the deck. Andy, remind me to change the name of the deck when we post it.
Okay.
It's the deck is Tajic Blade of the Legion. So it's not the new Tajic, it's the old Tajic. So it's the old one. This is the 2/2 indestructible one that has Battalion, which means whenever Tajic Blade of the Legion and at least 2 other creatures attack, Tajic gets +5/+5 until the end of the turn. That's Tajic. And yes, back in those days, this counted as a rare. Nowadays, that's an uncommon because it doesn't do a whole lot other than just
a 2/2 for 4.
Right.
This came out in Dragon's Maze. Did you build this right when the card was new?
It was pretty new when I built. It probably wasn't Dragon's Maze. It was probably the next set had already come out.
Okay.
Right
do you know? Area. Do you want to hazard a guess of when Dragon's Maze came out?
No. When did Dragon's Maze come out?
2013, 10 years ago.
I'd like to think the deck isn't that old, but it probably is.
Hey, it happens. I've been playing Magic for 5 years now?
There we go. For those of you who are looking at the list, you'll probably see some cards that are a little newer than that, but honestly, most of the cards are pretty much, the deck was built, it seemed to work reasonably well, it was powerful enough with our group, so I just ran with it. So this is the kind of deck that really messes with EDH Rex numbers, because it's more of a mishmash of whatever white and red cards I had that I thought would go good, and it just sort of worked that way. So yeah. So
I mean, it's funny. I look at this deck, I look at this pile of cards, and I think about how fun it is to build Boros, because you can just throw cards in and have it work.
Tajic is a typical Boros deck. You're making a bunch of creatures, you're attacking. That's what Boros does. That's what Boros wants to do. And I generally play that style. So I really leaned into that. So the only real variation in this deck is it can go wide and it goes high as well. Because I've won plenty of games, pumping up a whole pile of creatures or just amassing so many tokens you just overwhelm the opponent. And I've also won plenty of games with Tajic doing commander damage. When you've got a 2/2 indestructible who gets equipped with a sword, so gets another +2/+2, and swings in with at least 2 other people and 2 other creatures. Now he's a 9/9 indestructible, and if you've got a sword on him, he probably has protection and can swing right and just dodges right past everybody and hits your opponent. I mean, it just doesn't take very long.
I could see this deck. I could see the building process of this deck be just, trying to narrow it down from 200 cards. Like, I feel like this card is just so it just seems so fun to like just be like, yeah, that'll work in there, and not like, not to say that this deck is any bit, just hobbled together, but I think that like I could see it just being all of a sudden like, oh, I put too many things in.
Because like you said, I mean, if this is what Boros does, then it's easy to just start firing everything that Boros decks have into this deck, and then starting to add all of your favorite cards in white and red, and suddenly you've got a stack of cards that's just far too big. But
that said, I think a lot of these cards, there are plenty of cards in here that I'm like, oh wow, I haven't seen this card, or like, oh wow, like this should be played in more things type of thing, and we'll get there. But
okay. Was there a particular area you wanted to talk about first?
Let's start with I don't know. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with the tokens.
Okay.
Just because the tokens were one of the earlier things I looked at when putting the deck together, because to be honest, because I had Assemble the Legion and I had Rise of the Hobgoblins in my collection, and thought, okay, I definitely want to run them, and as long as we're going to go with them, that's how we're going to get Battalion to kick in for Tajic. So let's really lean into that. So I mean, I've got a list of, there's 10 different token makers on this one. Obviously, Assemble the Legion is one of the big ones, and it's very easy for people to forget because you play Rise of the Hobgoblins, and it feels like, oh, you've played your sorcery, but it's not, because it just sits there, and for the most part does nothing until you make it miserable for your opponents. And first strike on a creature like Tajic, that's a 7/7 already. That makes things ugly. So I really liked it. Captain of the Watch is another great one. It's also nice because, of course, he also, not only does he come in with a bunch of tokens, he pumps Tajic and all other soldiers with a +1/+1 and gives them vigilance. So now you're swinging with no risk on the kickback. You got Cloud Goat Ranger, Conqueror's Pledge, which I like, but it's so hard to play that one. The cost is just so high. Decree of Justice, another fun one. Elspeth Knight Errant, I've got that under the tokens, but practically speaking, Elspeth does a little bit of everything. So that's nice. Elspeth, and then also Elspeth's Son's Champion. More creatures there, and the ability to wrath out the low power stuff. That's always it tends to always do well. And then Nomad's Assembly sort of rounding it out.
Yeah, you're wrathing out the big stuff because 4 greater.
Right.
But
so you're making all these tokens, and then
it doesn't hit Tajic, which is nice. So you get that go wide to continue.
Right. And with Nomad's Assembly, a bunch of tokens, and then with the rebound, you just add even more. So works out really well that way. I'm going to look at just a couple of the removal cards. Some of the standards that you'd expect are here: Austere Command, Martial Coup. They obviously make sense. One of my favorites is Durgar Hedge Mage.
Oh my god, yes.
It's a dwarf shaman. It costs 2 and a hybrid red-white. And it says when it enters the battlefield, if you control 2 or more mountains, you may destroy target artifact. If you control 2 or more plains, you may destroy target enchantment. Now it doesn't say basic mountains and basic plains, so it just needs to be mountains and plains. And not surprisingly, there are plenty of those in this deck. I know that the land list says there's only 3 mountains, but don't be fooled. There are plenty more in there. I really get a kick out of the Hedge Mage, and I know that it's not super powerful or anything like that, but it's just one of those cards that I love seeing show up in these decks.
One that I was surprised that wasn't in here was Balefire Liege.
Balefire Liege is here.
Is it?
Yep. He's in the pump category.
You know what? That makes sense. Like, after hearing about Dwerger Hedge Mage, I was like, that reminds me of this thing, because it has the, like, 2 separate lines so that it is stackable, and I love cards like Dwerger Hedge Mage, where you just get more value off of just doing the thing you want to do anyway.
Right. And I mean, I love Balefire Liege, especially when I've got a commander that's 2 colors, because it's always fun when you can have the Liege out, play Tajic, and it just feels like Tajic's coming into play, smoking my opponent for 3 damage right off the bat, and gaining me 3 life, just as he sort of settles in to become a 4/4 indestructible because of Balefire Liege's bonuses. I love that. That's just spectacular. So
I love too that, like, a lot of these cards, like, they're fairly inexpensive price wise. But, like, some of them you've heard of, some of them, like Wear and Tear you never see.
You never see. And a lot of the cards that you would expect to see aren't here. One of the cards that I think goes in just about every Boros deck, oh god, what is it called? It's an instant for a red and a white, and it's, what is it? All damage dealt to you from one source is dealt to the controller of that source. Yeah, thank you. You would expect Deflecting Palm in here, and Deflecting Palm is one of my favorite cards to put in this kind of a deck. But it's not here. It was another card that didn't quite make the cut, that I was looking at other things, and decided that I wanted to try something else instead of that. So
a lot of these, which is nice, is that they're either flexible or they do both in terms of hitting artifacts and or enchantments. Because I mean, I think that it's funny too, because you made this deck a number of years ago, and you had plenty of enchantment removal at the time, and it's starting to be like, we need more in general. And I mean, obviously, red and white, it's not hard.
Right. I think it was interesting because I think when I built this deck, our particular my play group at the time had a lot of enchantments in it. So I was building with that in mind. And then since then, that has sort of dipped away. And now it's coming back as a lot of artifacts and some enchantments as well. So the need for it has sort of returned. Maybe I should have altered the deck and then re-altered it, but that didn't happen. So I guess, hey, lucky me, I'm walking, people are now walking right into my removal package with the deck. So I'll take that every time.
Let's move on to Pump before we take our break.
Sure.
Because I think there are some very strong pieces in here. Your Chroma's Memorial, if you can get it down, amazing. Your Elish Norn Grand Cenobite, I am in love with this card. I think that it is so inherently, I don't want to say overpowered, but like, I remember like having a grudge against this card because I love playing tokens, and this stops any token deck.
It really does. It's listed under Pump, but honestly, you could probably put it under Removal. This is a mass removal card, almost even more than it is a Pump card. Any of the creatures that even survive this are just left to be puny. They're just puny. I mean, a 4/4 becomes a 2/2, and your 2/2 is now a 4/4. So you're winning most combat situations as long as Elesh Norn is out there. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's been plenty of times when I've counted on Elesh Norn only to have it removed before blockers were declared. But there were plenty of times when it wasn't, and it certainly paid off huge there. So,
two of my favorite cards out of this category in itself, I feel like generally should be played more, especially now. Mirror Entity. It's an all-star in any go-wide strategy. But I think that even in like a Voltron deck, which, I mean, this is, like you said, a hybrid Voltron go-wide kind of deal, pumping in mana to just make it bigger is pretty solid. I mean, you can pump Tajic with anything more than 2 mana.
The thing with Mirror Entity is you can do it anytime. So you swing in on your opponents. The Mirror Entity's sitting there. They all know it. So they're looking at how much damage they're going to take and how big, they have to overblock. Because they have to look at your cards and say, okay, Bruce can put 5 mana into Mirror Entity, make all these guys 5/5s. So all of these blocks become useless. Okay, so am I just doing this to absorb, to absorb damage, or to prevent me from taking all the damage direct from the creatures? Well, once they block with that in consideration, now you can look at it and say, do I need to do that? Or can I save the 5 mana and play something else? Because you get the final say on that, and that's a beautiful thing.
The other one I wanted to highlight here was Trailblazer's Boots. This is an equipment for 2 mana. It's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has non-basic landwalk. Equip for 2. And I think that, when was the last time you attacked an opponent that didn't have non-basics?
Even monocolored decks. I mean, take your pick. There's there's Maze of Ith. There's the Hall of the Bandit Lord that I'm running. Temple of the False God, which all of you should be running, is a non-basic card. There's just all sorts of options. And I know that it's probably not right that it be sitting in this group with pump spells, but it makes the creature unblockable. And I think that it fits with pump spells better than anywhere else. So
yeah, the only time it's not unblockable is like early game. And that's, right. Probably not true as well. Like, Yeah,
I mean, I'm not planning to swing with Tajic until probably turn 4 or 5.
Right.
So by then, opponents probably have somewhere between 4 and 6 mana, maybe 7. I'm betting at least one of them is going to be a non-basic land.
Yeah.
And it just leaves it wide open for me to swing in with Tajic unblocked. So, and this is part of the reason why, Tajic can take opponents out with commander damage. If they never have the opportunity to block, then that works pretty well. So
yeah. I love these cards because like I said, they feel at home here. I feel like this deck is such a time capsule of Boros. And I think that you could look at these cards and be like, oh yeah, I miss playing these cards, or I love these cards. And some of these are obviously timeless, like your swords and stuff. But I think that with as much room as there is to always update your decks, I think that
right.
A lot of these cards I feel like could bring a lot of smiles to the table, just because they're classics.
I agree, and I think we've seen a lot of new red white, and you can go down through this list of pump spells, and probably replace the entire list with cards that you can argue are better right across the board. Crescendo of War costs 4, and on each upkeep you add a counter to it, and that counts how many, it gives you +1, +0 when either you're attacking or blocking. That takes forever.
Yeah, it literally doesn't do anything until its next turn. Like,
right. So these are not spectacular cards, but they were nice when I built the deck, and they continue to be fun. And I enjoy playing them. And it's always a little bit of a quirk. Your opponents end up reaching out to see what you've built, what that card actually does, because they haven't seen it in forever.
And I think that it's so easy to throw, your Smothering Tides and stuff. And I think that you can kind of breathe a sigh of relief to tell your opponents that's not in here. But we have you have, I didn't do anything. You have made some updates, which we'll talk about on the other side of this break, along with some fun stuff, card draw, and what you have for protection and ramp. So we'll be right back.
This episode of Temple of Falsepot is brought to you by Tajic, the man with the wiggly sword. Really? He gets +5/+5 because other people are attacking, and he's got that goofy sword? I don't get it. The sword can't be that good. A wavy sword? It just seems ridiculous to me. Tajic, Blade of the Legion.
Ah, cool! Wavy sword. We're back. That's my new greeting. Wavy sword. Gravy sword. Gravy.
Ooh, gravy sword. That reminds me, I had poutine last week.
Ooh.
Oh, man. And a burger.
It's quite the meal.
And a burger.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, it was delicious.
Classic. Classic. Tajic. Is it Tajic or Tajic? Because we keep going back and forth.
Ooh, 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 it's Tajic. No?
You know. Anyway, we're back. We got some fun stuff to talk about. And subsequently, that's
quite
the
literally
name of our next section of your deck.
Yes.
And you know what? This is fun. It is extremely Boros.
Yeah, this deck is nothing if not Boros. Mostly, this is sort of a catch-all category for cards that I really wanted to be in the deck that don't really fit in another category, but still really should be in the deck. Sun Titan.
Sun Titan.
I don't have a recursion section in the deck. And Sun Titan is pretty much the only recursion only graveyard recursion that's in here. So here's Sun Titan. Hey, everybody knows what Sun Titan does. Wild Ricochet, because this deck doesn't do a lot of interaction with instants or sorceries. It's, what's on the field is what's there. Every once in a while there's a piece of removal that shows up, but Wild Ricochet is sort of the wild card. It's the one that, no one's really expecting to see when it actually does hit. So I think the one that's the most obvious is Insurrection. And there are plenty of people out there who would say, that's not fun stuff. Insurrection was very popular right around the time I built the deck. It seemed like every Boros deck, every deck that sort of went down this path ran Insurrection sort of as a game ender. You paid your 8 mana, you took everybody's dudes, swung back at everybody, and took most people out. And then it sort of fell out of favor because it was just one of those, everybody's using this card.
Yeah, it's like the red Craterhoof type thing.
Yeah, and it just got boring. It was like, oh, look, you won with Insurrection again. Congratulations on being completely unoriginal. And the card just sort of sat in my deck, and it doesn't come out as often as you might think. Partly because you can't play it in the early turns. So,
yeah.
And you only ever play it at specific times. I mean, if somebody just wrathed the board, the insurrection's not going to do anything. If you think an opponent is going to be able to counter it, you're not going to walk into it. So it's limited in the amount of times you can play it. But I find now there are fewer people playing it. When I do get to play it, it tends to be a surprise to most of my opponents. They're like, "Oh, I'd forgotten all about this card," and you can get some big hits that way.
Yeah, I think the beauty with Insurrection is that not only like obviously you're getting a bunch of attackers, but like what's more than that is that you are denying everybody else any blockers. And honestly, that's kind of more of the thing with this deck, and I mean this card. That's sweet. I have not played against this card before.
Right.
Knowingly.
And with Insurrection, I mean, like I said, I usually have at least 2 pump spells on the battlefield already.
Mm-hmm.
So you're taking your opponent's creatures and then making them bigger while you control them, and then swinging back at them. Yeah. And if they survive, congratulations, here's your creature back. Oh, it's now tiny again.
You
know, so that works out pretty well. Then the other two, the two angels, Aurelia and Gisela, I don't think that's particularly surprising. These are cards that show up in a lot of Boros decks, with Gisela doubling the damage to opponents and having the damage to you, and Aurelia giving you an extra
attack,
an extra combat step. So I don't think those are particularly surprising to anybody.
Gisela always interests me because it feels like one of the Phyrexians, you know, like it feels like that type of effect where it's 2 for you, you know, like double damage on you, none on me type, or half on me.
Right.
But
I always look at Gisela, and you know, if I want to make myself feel good about the way Gisela plays, you just think about 5. So Gisela, as a 5/5 creature, swings in, does 10 damage because you doubled the damage. Now, if an opponent swings at you with a 5, you prevent half that damage rounded up, so you only take the 3. That just doesn't seem fair in any way, shape, or form.
You're taking 2 actually because you're preventing 3.
Oh, prevent half that damage rounded up, right? So you're preventing. So that's what I mean. So you're dealing 10 and taking 2.
2.
I'm like, that is just not fair. Especially when you start realizing, you know, a creature like Gisela also has first strike. Hey! You know,
that seems extreme.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, and Gisela and Tajic swinging, you know, all it takes is that one other creature, and suddenly your Tajic is swinging as a 7/7, but he's doing 14. And that's if you haven't pumped him in any other way. And of course I have. Of course I have.
So, like, very easily, he could do 21 commander damage.
Yeah, it doesn't take much. It really doesn't take much at all. So, you know, when adding one of the swords onto him, and it just, okay, well, we're at 9. We're dealing 18. It just, it just gets ridiculous. And the other 2 that are in there, Path of Bravery has been mostly underwhelming. My life total doesn't often stay high enough for my creatures to be getting +1/+1, so it basically reads, whenever one or more creatures I control attack, I gain life equal to the number of attacking creatures. Quite often, the number of attacking creatures is only 3 or 4. I mean, sometimes it's 6, but gaining 6 life and committing all of your creatures to an attack, it's not somehow protecting you from the kickback.
Yeah.
Path of Bravery is a little underwhelming, and it's probably a card that will come out.
Yeah, this is an example of power creep for sure, because I feel like if they made this card now, it would be, you know, you gain life equal to the power of attacking creatures or whatever, like the combined power.
Right.
But, interesting.
So, it's not that exciting. The other one that's in here is Firemane Angel. It says whenever the angel and at least 2 other creatures attack, Firemane Angel deals 3 damage to target creature or player, and you gain 3 life. And this is an underwhelming card.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 3/3 flyer. What I have found so often, though, is what Firemane Angel does is Firemane Angel attacks with Tajic.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever creature could block Tajic suddenly takes 3 damage. Okay. How big is that creature now?
Right.
Because that creature is certainly going to die if it blocks Tajic, if it's not already dead. And quite often, that creature is now dead. So now there's nothing there to block Tajic. And it's amazing how effective it is as a combat trick for a card that's literally sitting on the battlefield. You know, the text is right there. Anyone can read it. And people just don't. It's a 3/3 flyer that does 3 points of damage when 3 creatures attack. Okay. And nobody thinks of it. So, an underwhelming card, but it seems to come in clutch when I want it to. And,
I mean, you're getting free lightning helixes off of it every attack.
Right, and,
so
sure, and it's a 3/3 flyer for 4. I mean, it never hurts to have some flyers in your deck, and this one certainly qualifies. So,
very quickly, let's go over your protection and ramp. I think there are things that we've either mentioned briefly or just kind of very not general, but like things that you'd expect. So
the protection package. I mean, Boros Charm giving the creatures indestructible, Mother of Ruins, there basically to protect Tajic and nothing else. Swiftfoot Boots, same thing, and the 2 swords, Sword of Feast and Famine, Sword of Fire and Ice. It's just protection from those colors. This is not particularly rocket science here. The Sword of Feast and Famine is more for protection than it is for the ability to untap your lands. I'm not, that's a great bonus, but it's there for the protection. And the ramp package, it's probably a little small. There's only 6 cards in the ramp package, and to be fair, they're all artifacts, so they're kind of at risk. But Boros Key Rune, Boros Signet, Darksteel Ingot, Journeyer's Kite, Soul Ring, and Solemn Simulacrum. It could be better. It's just not. Those were the cards I had, and that's what I ran with, and I just haven't changed it. I have never really found that I have an issue with mana. I'm running 40 lands. I can usually get a land drop every turn for the first 4 or 5 turns.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tajic is ready to go. And, when I get the extra mana, that's great. Journeyer's Kite does real work for this deck because it's repeatable. Which is something that I don't think a lot of people appreciate because it costs 5 to go and get that first thing. So you already have to have 5 mana if you're using it on the first turn. Most times I'm not.
Well, and you have to
play the kite
out.
It's
an artifact. Never mind. I was going to say, and you have to tap, so it needs haste, but it's not a creature.
Right. No, but you pay 2 on turn 2 and put it out, and then on turn 3,
you get a land.
Into
your hand.
Putting it into your hand, and this is the reason nobody plays Journeyer's Kite. But it means that I never miss a land drop if I've got Journeyer's Kite out. And for a deck that is expecting long games, if you hit turn 9 and you're playing your 9th land, you're probably doing just as well as any of the ramp decks. Just because the ramp decks, sure, there are turns when they get extra, but then there are turns when they're not even playing their land drops. So it works out, and like I said, I rarely feel like I have issues for mana. So.
Yeah, and I feel like if you were to update the ramp, I think it would be pretty obvious that like it would head more into things like treasures. Treasures have been, all over the place lately, especially in red.
Right. Yeah, I will say one of the cards that I have added, and I put it in card draw because I think that's more where it's going to hit. Master of Ceremonies. So one of the new cards. I love Master of Ceremonies, and I bought a bunch of them, and I've put them in most of my decks that have white. I just love the idea that on the beginning of the upkeep, you start marching your way around the table and offering people whatever they need. So it helps the game because your opponent is either getting the card they need, getting the mana they need, or getting the creature they need. And in return, you're getting that as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the last game I played was with Brina. I had Master of Ceremonies out. It was a 6-player game. So I drew 6 cards. I drew 5 cards that turn because everybody picked card draw. So I just kept drawing cards all around the table. And that can happen with treasures or with citizens, whatever. You're going to get something from it. And it's a fun card, and I threw it in there in the hopes. And, every once in a while I will get treasures. So,
yeah. Yeah. And I feel like in protection as well.
Right.
I find it interesting that none of your swords give you pro white, which I feel like would be the color that could take care of Tajic permanently.
Yeah. I'd love to say that there was a special reason why there's no pro white sword in there. I suspect it was more a case of, hey, I don't have any other swords when I built the deck.
That's fair.
So this deck is very definitely one of those. The limitations of the deck are based on the limitations of my card pool.
Yeah.
Because I built it with what I had. So quite often you're going to see cards and think you could do much better with that than using that, or I can think of a card that's specifically better than that particular card. There are other cards that I have upgraded, Master of Ceremonies being one of them. But I like it where it's at. So that's sort of why we don't have more protection.
And honestly, if you had, say, sort of War and Peace, the red white one, then if somebody was to try to unsummon your Tajic, you couldn't use Mother of Runes on it because it has pro white. So I mean, there is that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, you make it work somehow.
As we start to round out this deck, are there any lands you want to mention? I notice a significant missing one, and we'll see if.
Okay.
But
I'm a big fan of Shinka the Blood-Soaked Keep.
Ooh.
Just target legendary creature gains first strike until the end of the turn. There are a few legendary creatures in the deck, but I mean, obviously, this is aimed mostly at Tajic. Sunhome, Fortress of the Legion, is giving double strike. I mean, well, that never hurts when you're running it on Tajic. And I ran Thespian Stage because sometimes I want 2 copies of something. The deck itself, according to Archidect, the deck costs over $1,000. You can trim up this land package and probably take out most of that total pretty easily. Well, I mean, there's a plateau in there, and there's a few other cards that are kind of pricey, and you can take them out of there without much loss in abilities. I mean, just standard dual lands will do just as well, and will save you quite a bit of money. So which one am I missing?
Rogue's Passage. Or honestly, any of the lands that let your things through unblocked, because I mean,
that's a good thought.
Tajic doesn't have trample, so a lot of this, if it doesn't have
and he rarely ever gets trample, because it's just not something that you get from these ones. It's more evasion. He'll dodge around it or get protection from something. Rogue's Passage is definitely something to think about.
And I get why you also don't probably have much of this in here. But anything that gives him vigilance would be pretty sweet as well. I feel like keeping him back as a blocker as well would be not necessarily you wouldn't necessarily always block with him, because I think it would be a good deterrent for people attacking you. Because it's hard for them to get through. So
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. I know that there's one or two cards I think that can give a creature or a group of creatures vigilance, but not a lot. So yeah, that's definitely a good way to go. The key though is to remember with your token creatures, you're not really looking to block with them.
That's true.
Unless you think that they can take out an opponent, or you absolutely have to do that. We've talked about a number of ways to make Tajic big. That's great because it takes out one opponent, but you're supposed to be wide enough that you can take out another. Like this is a deck that's really gunning for one swing, two opponents gone.
Yeah.
You really want to hammer home and make it count.
Speaking of card draw, this is where we see most of the updates in this deck, if not all.
Yeah. Well, when I was recently looking at the deck, I realized my card draw for the deck pretty much amounted to Skull Clamp and Mentor of the Meek. That was the entirety of the card draw. Now, when either of those come out, that's great. You're going to get plenty of card draw, but otherwise, you're pulling off the top of the deck over and over again, and that's just it's just too slow. That was one of the bigger weaknesses with the deck. So,
especially if you are pumping your creatures enough that Mentor of the Meek or Skull Clamp aren't actually drawing you cards, because if you have any sort of pump, like board pump, then it's harder to get there. But
you get an Elish Norn out, and suddenly Mentor of the Meek is not kicking in very often.
Not ever, actually.
Ever. So it can be a little tricky, but some of the other ones, the one I got kind of get the most kick out of is Combustible Gear Hulk. It enters the battlefield. Target opponent may have you draw 3 cards. If the player doesn't, you mill 3 cards, and Combustible Gear Hulk deals damage to that player equal to the total mana value of those cards. Now, with my deck, you're probably looking at dealing 5 or 6. But your opponents don't know that. And most of the time, if you're picking the correct opponent, they're going to let you draw the cards. You can find somebody who wants to work with you. They'll let you draw the cards. Or you find somebody whose life total is so precariously low. It's amazing. Once somebody's life total is under 10, no, they're not even going to risk taking the damage. You draw the cards.
Yeah, I mean, I just did some quick math, and like 1/3 of your deck is 4 mana value or above. So like,
right.
It's pretty easy to get one of those high cards in there, and then, or like by chance having one of those in there. Yeah.
So if it's 1/3, then arguably you'll get one that costs 4 or more, a land, and something else.
And on top of that, it's a 6/6 for 6 with first strike.
Well, yeah. So there's some bonuses here. There's some perks. So I like that one. One that I've recently put in, haven't played with it yet, is Belborca Spectral Sergeant. So it says, note the mana value of each card as it's put into exile. This is irrelevant. And then the next line is, Belborca Spectral Sergeant's power is equal to the greatest number noted this turn. So if you flip a card that costs 6, Belborca's a 6/5 until the end of the turn. But more importantly, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. So
impulse draw.
Right. So I'm getting the impulse draw. Now, I don't do a lot of impulse draw in my decks, so I wanted to try it out. And to be fair, Belborca has no ability, no ways, no trample, no first strike, no double strike, no flying. It is just a vanilla creature when it comes to combat. So realistically, even if it flipped over Insurrection and became an 8/5, it still gets blocked by a 1/1 on the ground. It's just not that exciting. But it's there for the card draw. Because every upkeep, I'm now drawing 2. Because whatever I flip over, I'll just play it. That's the other joy with playing a deck like this. every card you flip over should be something that you can just play out right away.
And the tagline of today's episode, that's if there's no pumps on the table. Like,
right.
You know,
right. Well,
you flip over a land, it's a 0/5, but if you've got, Balefire Liege or something, it's a 1/6 or a 2. No, it's a 2/7.
2/7. Yeah.
Which
and I mean,
is excellent.
And if you've got Balefire Liege out and you flip over anything that's not a land, if it's a colored spell, then you're going to get either 3 points of damage or some life gain from the Liege. So, it offers a lot, and I think just the card draw alone is worth it. And we'll see how often maybe Belborca will have to swing in and be the third person coming in. The one draw spell we didn't talk about was Reforge the Soul.
Oh yeah.
This is for 3 red, each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. The reason this is different from all the rest of the wheels is it has miracle for 1 and a red. You can cast this card for its miracle cost when you draw it, if it's the first card you drew this turn. So on your draw step, you draw and find a Reforge the Soul. Something to keep in mind is if you are able to draw on an opponent's turn, if you're drawing Reforge the Soul, it is your first draw that turn. So even if it's your first draw spell on an opponent's turn in the middle of combat, you can still do this, get your whole new 7 cards, and then try and find something to deal with the attack, or however you want to use it. I will say I'm always reluctant with this one. This is another card that I think may get pulled just because, man, I love getting 7 new cards, but handing my opponents, each of them, 7 new cards, that's a tough pill to swallow. As far as the miracle, when you're playing it, you really do have to keep in mind that when you draw the card, you want to look at it before you put it in your hand. Because once it goes to your hand, then it's hard, we're playing Commander, it's casual. They're all going to be like, oh, okay, you had it, good. But, you do want to try and play sharp. So it's something to keep in mind. But, for how often I've used it for the miracle cost, I think maybe another repeatable card draw would be better.
Yeah. And
yeah.
Do you still have this deck together?
I do.
I think it's pretty sweet. I know that the times that I've played against it, it's either gone boom or bust.
It's amazing. This deck probably has one of the better win percentages of all of my decks, which always throws me off a little bit. But I think back, and it seems like most of the time when I play it, I can pull out wins because it's one of these decks where you start out, opponents do something, and then it looks like you're just done. You've got Tajic out there by himself. He's not doing anything other than being a blocker. And you're slowly building your hand back. You're getting a board position, but you basically look defenseless and weak. And then something else happens on the board, and suddenly, bam, bam, you've got 2 creatures, and you start swinging in again. And so it seems to be able to swoop in at the last minute.
I think the thing that I like about Tajic so much is that, one, he's hard to deal with. Whether you either have to exile him, generally with white, or give him -X with generally black. And obviously, with your protection suite, you can do that. You can make sure that doesn't happen. But if, say, he does end up back in the command zone, he's a 4-cost commander. So you play him again for 6, and then again he's hard to deal with. So it takes a lot out of your opponents to just deal with him as a board presence, unless Darksteel Mutation or Frogify type things.
Right. But I will say, quite often with Indestructible, the best way to deal with Indestructible, bounce it. Well, he's never getting more expensive when you bounce it. If I get to cast it back from my hand, it's still only 4. Bouncing Tajic is you bought a turn.
Right.
And sometimes you bought 2 because sometimes he doesn't have haste. And so, not saying that's not a valid way to deal with it. I am saying that it means that it's one you don't have to pay the commander tax. So it's, again, one of those times when he just comes out as a 4-power creature and it does work. So
I think the 4 mana value is definitely like a surprising for its time.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it's not, say, like a 4/4 for 6. It being a 2/2 for 4 is primo. And honestly, like, I feel like if you were to want to, spice it up a little, like, or like you have this deck and you're like, oh yeah, like I've played it a bunch over the past couple of weeks. I think slotting in any of the other legendary Boros creatures, like, the deck still stands pretty well. I think, having Aurelia be the one to head it, or Gisela, obviously. I mean, Gisela is a little harder because it's 7 mana, but I think Belborca could be pretty cool as the head of this as well.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. And especially Belborca, just because it costs less.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's really a creature that people are going to go after. I think the power of getting in the extra card every turn is not something that people really recognize right away as being something that's as strong as it is, especially in some of the longer games that we play. So
yeah. Cool. Anything else you want to say about this deck?
Not a whole lot. I have a good time playing it. This is one of these decks that I feel like I can play on autopilot. I don't have to. There's not a lot of thought involved. Oh, it's time for this. It's time for this. Oh, look, I have this card. I should play this now. There's not a whole lot of, wait until this exact moment and then do this and this and everything will fall into place. It's Boros. Play out your stuff, swing as hard as you can. Just, enjoy the game for what it is. So,
yeah. It's a fun little thing. Cool. Yeah. I think that's going to do it for us tonight. Right. We got to wrap things up. We got places to be. We got food to eat. We got Magic to play. I believe this episode comes out the 8th. So if you're in Magic Philly coming up, make sure to keep an eye out for Bruce.
Come say hi.
He's 6'4", tall, but he'll probably be sitting. So just keep an eye out for him. Say hi.
Like I said on Twitter, you can find me easily enough. I'll be the guy who's got a quiver full of Magic Commander decks. I'll probably be playing Commander. You should be able to find me real easy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll be back next week with a cool episode because we're, on our season 10. No big deal. We're going to be talking about animals. We got the snakes and the spiders,
keep the
crawlies,
change, you filthy animals,
the gorillas. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, make sure you tune in. And if you do, make sure you tune in anyway, because we got a lot to cover. So we'll see you next week. Because we're Tumble False Pod, where our decks are not optimized, but our plays sure as heck are fun. I'm Andy.
I'm Bruce.
And play some Magic for me. Say hi to Bruce in Philly. And may your 5th land be the Temple.
Bye.
Wait. Before you go, I just wanted to say thank you for listening. You can reach out to us via email at falsepodmtg@gmail.com or on Twitter @falsepodmtg. Bruce is @manaburned, and I'm @AndyWeekend, though you'll definitely notice I use the podcast Twitter far more often. Now that we've got you here, make sure you subscribe, rate us on whatever podcast platform you use. It helps us out. It gets us more reach. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. Like a video there. Leave some comments for more casual enjoyment. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with some more timeless discussions about all things casual. So come hang out, and may your 5th land be the Temple. Bye-bye. Should I do my best, Bruce? Bye!